Hey everybody, you've got Marcel back again. For today I'm going to share some of my experiences in the past regarding some of the more toxic relationships I've been in, a little bit of the things that I went through and how it affected me. Hence the title, A Living Nightmare. This may come across as one of my darker videos, and I realize that everyone's individual experience, the way they relate to stress and turmoil in their lives, is going to be different. It's all relative to the person. In some ways, it's like in combat. Some people will duck and cover the minute they hear a loud sound, and others will jump up and try to fight. We all have a very different response to stress. A big part of this video is going to be discussing the options a man has when presented with a horrifyingly toxic relationship, and the way that men cope with that kind of situation. I can only speak from my perspective, of course, though it may be possible someone out there is experiencing a very similar thing right now, and it may give them a new outlook on how they can proceed forward, or what to expect from their situation. When I look back on some of the worst years of my life, I can honestly say they all involved women in one way or another. Now, I'm sure there are those of you out there who are going to hear that and think that it's pathetic, but honestly, I've been through combat. I've traveled the world, I've seen many horrific things, but none of them affected me in the same way than some of the people that were supposed to be my partner. Girls that were supposed to be there for me in my time of need, or at the very least might have been expected to offer some kind of emotional support. So firstly, for the sake of context, when it comes to me and my dealing with stress, my ability to cope with abnormal situations is to dissociate. I feel like it's no longer me living through that situation, and I'm kind of above myself, just witnessing what is going on. Now, I don't know how many of you have ever been through something really terrifying, but for me, the best way I can describe it is it fell down to training and muscle memory. I felt like, and it was just my mindset, since it wasn't me experiencing what was happening, I could act accordingly and perhaps not have the same level of fear. Almost when you're playing a video game and you don't worry so much about rushing the character in. Yeah, you have a vested interest in the character. You don't want them to die because of the repercussions involved, but not for fear of loss of actual life. The player doesn't die when the character does, and in my mind at the time, nor would I die if my person did. Well, obviously I really would have, but it was a sense of self-preservation, a way to psychologically cope. Perhaps there would have been a better way, it's just the way my mind worked at the time. Combat for me was not as difficult as I expected it to be. I didn't see as much as a lot of my comrades. I was very lucky. I made it back, but I did see enough to know how I would react. Things like that, traumatic experiences, if you take the time to mentally prepare for them, to set up scenarios in your mind of how you will respond, and you repeat them enough, if you are fortunate to think of things that actually do occur, or cover enough similar scenarios that you have a mental pathway of what to do during that occurrence, your chances of surviving or even behaving the way that you want go up dramatically. That's why people do rehearsals for things, so they have an expectation of how they're going to behave, and you can do that in your own mind. Combat has a very rational component. There's parts of it that you can expect from the enemy, from the opposition, however you want to look at it. So what am I getting with all of this? When someone you trust, someone that you expect to act a certain way that's close to you, behaves irrationally, there is no way to prepare yourself mentally for something like that. When they betray you, when they go against your expectations, what kind of pathways are built? Who mentally rehearses for a breakup, for having your wife or partner cheat on you, for finding all of the money that you've worked for several years suddenly gone? And then what limitations are imposed on the average male in that kind of circumstance? Perhaps after years of experiencing it, a guy might have something he can do. If the last 10 girlfriends cheated and lied, he'll know what to expect. But how does that affect his ability to bond properly or even make a good connection with anyone in the future? By then, is he really even getting with the women for the same reason that he was in the first place? Guys can tolerate a lot, but those first few relationships do set the groundwork of what to expect, and they have the biggest effect on his abilities later on. So to relate this all back to my past experiences, and I encourage you to take an open mind with this, I suffered through romantic and emotional abuse, several years of it at a time. It feels strange, almost cringeworthy saying that, but it's the only way that I can describe it. The same behaviors, and we all know this already, but the same behaviors being pointed towards a woman would land a guy in jail in a heartbeat. Society, however, expects a man to endure. Expects a man to stand his ground and support his family, perhaps kids that aren't even his, despite however he's being treated. Though my point behind it is how I reacted to a situation that was not rational to me, didn't make sense in my mind, where I was being attacked, but then at the same time, not even minutes later, being pulled back in and shown kind of a twisted version of compassion. Days where everything I did was considered wrong for no reason. Even getting the right answer on some kind of emotional game would land me in more trouble. And as the months and years rode by and every day became more drained, more emotionally vacant, I started to find the only way to cope with what I was experiencing was also to dissociate. Day after day would wind by with me finding little ways to escape the reality that was my life. Whether it was burying myself into a video game for short amounts of time before having to go and deal with some other guy's kids, or even going to work became something of a break. I used to joke with my comrades that going to war was a break from my ex-wife. Behind all the laughter, they never knew I wasn't kidding. Though what could I really do? You can't fight or flight in those kind of situations. Maybe you could run, but then there's socially expected behaviors. There's repercussions for running from a relationship like that. You can't confront the woman directly. You certainly can't raise a hand to her. So what mental pathways can I build? What could I do? Eventually, with time, the light glazed over in my eyes, and I started feeling like the world that I was living in was something more of a dream. Days and weeks blurred together. My memory faded. Now, I don't say any of this for sympathy. I actually consider myself really mentally powerful. I feel ashamed about the way I responded to years of having someone treat me that way. And what's interesting is that it was very sneaky. As far as abuse goes, a very gradual process. You don't ever really see it coming. Any man on a good day could tolerate that kind of behavior from someone, even while having their hands metaphorically tied. Though in the longer experience, it almost feels like I was drawn in with the opportunity for love, but quickly realized that I was trapped, tricked, even captured. If any of you have ever studied into the theories behind Stockholm Syndrome, it's where people that are victims of capture and possibly hostage situations start to relate to their captors despite the irrational nature of that behavior, possibly even to romantic levels. But what powerful, normal man would stick around in such a toxic relationship, a situation even, long enough for that kind of feeling to arise? You consider the combination of society forcing men not to react to women in any way negatively, pinning them down in their relationships under threat of losing most of what they own, access to their children and social circles. Does the average man have a choice not to wear those shackles if they want to maintain their quality of life the way it is? Everyone has a breaking point. Eventually, my life became, the quality parts of it were the opportunities I had to escape from the reality that was my home. How many men work hard, dread going home to their own families? And I use the term family referring to what they've built with the woman, not their actual family, not their blood relatives. They long for the opportunities to get out and away from it. What kind of living is that? How many men are forced with having that reality shattered despite its toxic nature from the beginning, and have no means to cope with the situation? Had something that popped up the other day. One of my family members came up to me and said that a friend, a colleague that they worked with years ago, took their own life. It was a male. I looked at this family member without hesitation and said, "Oh, did they have problems in their relationship?" Were they married? And I got a yes to both questions, and I was not surprised at all. I'm almost disappointed. I was hoping it would have been something else, but it gets really repetitive seeing the same scenarios play out again and again. So many people out there that don't get help, don't have access to any resources, any way to survive a situation like that. The only reason I pulled out of that situation because I had no access to videos like this. I had no means to seek answers. The very little therapy that I got was given to me by the military and was very pro-family, pro-take care of your wife or woman kind of attitude. None of it addressed the actual problem. The only reason that I broke out of that has to do with the way that I was raised and the way that I interpret the world. By breaking me down emotionally, I lost my ability to bond on a romantic level. Sure, it broke me down in ways that would have allowed her to manipulate me better, but by losing my emotional connection to the situation and given my very rational thought process in everything else in my life, I was able to force myself to justify walking away from the situation, but I had to be almost completely cold and heartless to do it, despite it being an act for my own survival. If I had stayed in that relationship, I don't believe that I would be alive today, let alone not accomplished any of the great things that I've done by now. I know, looking back at my past and the way that I reacted to other things, I wouldn't have made it. And it wasn't a matter of strength or toughness. There's 1,001 ways I could have coped with a situation had it been anyone else. But only under those circumstances was I expected to sit there and take it for years. In the end, the direction I was going was that I lost grip with reality. And without any kind of programming, without any muscle memory to fall back on, the possibilities if someone less rational would have gone through the same experience are terrifying. I know that I can't convince anyone not to jump blindly into a relationship, but at the very least, if I can give an expectation of the worst case scenarios, they might be able to build mental pathways. By that I mean things that they could do if something were to go wrong. Tools that I never had, maybe that will lead them to better decisions. That is, better decisions for everyone, even the woman, who is obviously a poor match for someone who's in that much pain. Anyway, I'm about to work on a video here shortly. It's going to be a reply to Sandman's video, in fact, the one that I requested he make for me. By the way, he did an awesome job on it. His is called Monkey Branching Min. I'll put a link to it right there. The one that I'm gonna make will be a reply to my personal experience regarding nurturing, social programming, and how it all ties into monkey branching. Some of my life experiences when I was developing, and how having kind of a difficulty with the way I interact with people, almost a social disorder, and learn said behaviors, wound up saving me, but in something of a bizarre way. Though that's a story for another day. I made a previous video, the Blue Pill Addiction, I'll put a link to it here, that was more of a biological breakdown of why guys get stuck in these situations and linger on. It has more to do with the pleasure-pain response of the mind. I appreciate you hearing me through on all this. It's amazing what looking back on some of the same experiences 8, 10, 12 years later can do when you have the knowledge that MGTOW has brought me. It put my own past in a very different perspective. If you have any thoughts, please share them down below. In the meantime, like, share, and subscribe to hear more. This has been Marcel.